All right, thank you for taking these questions. We have another question from Jeffrey, who is reading your My Big Toe book for the second time, and he refers to Book 1, Section 1, Chapter 16, page 112. This question has to do with PMR jobs and the way in which we make our livings. The Christ entity spoke of such things as, "Woe to the man who giveth his brother a drink. Look at the birds of the air. They do not sow or reap and gather into barns, yet your heavenly Father feeds them. Are you not more valuable to him than they are? It is not the healthy who needs a doctor, but the sick." When questioned by the Pharisees why he eats with tax collectors, Matthew, and sinners, this is how the Christ entity responded. The above passages are interpreted by me. If you make a living promoting materialism or anything else that will lead people astray, then you're part of the problem. And there was a very specific passage that clearly states this. I cannot find it at the moment. The question is, on the above reference, page 112, Tom wrote that he was working with missile defense development. How does he reconcile this PMR job with growing towards love and away from fear? I'm finding myself questioning why I work in the finance industry. Am I promoting the delusional importance of money? Is it why I struggle so much with my work? I like learning about it, but should I be so engrossed in it? I'm having a hard time understanding this dichotomy.
Okay, well, I can answer that. But you see, I've had this question at least a dozen times, and you can probably find it elsewhere. But you do what you do for multiple reasons. Okay, you have to look at the entropy of each one of those reasons. There's lots of things. Some things will lower entropy, some things will raise entropy. So life is not so simple that whatever you do is always absolutely perfect in its lowering of entropy or absolutely awful in its raising of entropy. The things you do, the choices you make, may raise a little entropy over here and decrease a little entropy over there. But you have to look at all of those, issues, whether you're increasing or decreasing entropy, and you need to make your choice that has the lowest entropy. Often a decision that you make that has the lowest entropy is still going to hurt some people. It's still going to affect some people negatively. So you can't necessarily limit yourself to only doing things that are positive for everyone. Now, it's nice if you can make everything positive for everyone. But let's say you have, two girlfriends and you're ready to get married and you're going to marry one of them. Well, the other one is going to be hurt. You see, how can you pick one without hurting the other? Does that mean you have to never pick and stay a bachelor forever and not marry either one of them because you can't hurt the other one? No, sometimes the things that you do and that you need to do, you just have to be honest with people, and sometimes you'll hurt other people, and they will take that hurt and it will help them grow. They'll learn from it. They'll learn how they ended up there, and they'll think about it. And it may actually turn into be a good thing for them. And if you think back, you'll probably realize that those times when you thought you really got a bad deal and you got hurt, when you look back at it 20 years later, you'll say, "Oh, that was the best thing that ever happened to me." You'll realize that that hurt made you see things in a different way, made you grow up, made you, more capable of dealing with life. And then when other things came your way, you were smarter. You had learned. You'd handle them better. And the reason that you learned and handled them better was because you got run over sometime in the past and had a hard time, and you learned from it. So, the things that happen aren't just make everybody happy or everybody sad. We do things that sometimes have to hurt other people. And maybe the low entropy solution is that you marry Jane and not Jill. Because with chill, you'd have had problems and it might not have lasted very long and ended up ugly. And with Jan, you think it's got a lot more low entropy. So you make that choice. That's your best low entropy choice. Okay. Well, you do that. And you can't let every single action, you can't assess it for the absence of raising entropy. You have to assess it as, in the long term, which path will be the lowest entropy. That's the way you have to assess things. So now, I did work for missile defense. Before that, I worked for Army Technical Intelligence. I could say very accurately in both those jobs, the things that I were doing were positive. Okay? They saved lives. They were good things to do. There's a big difference between missile defense and missile offense. Missile offense is where you launch missiles to kill other people. Missile defense is where you keep other people's missiles from killing you. So there's a real big difference there. Defense is usually a good thing. Offense is usually uncalled for, but not always. Sometimes it's time to stand up for yourself. Sometimes violence is the right answer, but defense is usually good as long as you don't start becoming offensive because you have a good defense. Then that's not so good. Now, I worked on, in general, developing new technology, but the technology that is valuable for defense is totally different than the technology that you need for offense. The two are not the same. In defense, what you need is a missile that flies, at Mach 4 that can hit another missile that's coming in at Mach 7 and destroy it before it comes and kills you. Well, that's a technology of very, very fast, small things. Now, when you have offense, you need something that can lift huge weights and move them to someplace far away. Well, the difference between those is a Ferrari and a dump truck. And they have totally different technologies in them. Yes, they're both automotive. Yes, they both have engines. They both have wheels. But other than that, the technology that makes a really good, one of those big trucks where if you stood next to the wheel would be bigger than you. The wheel's has a 7-foot diameter or an 8-foot diameter wheel. The technology in that is totally different than the technology that makes a Ferrari or a Lamborghini or any of those race cars, street racers, good. Completely different technology. So I worked on technology for defense, and I had no problem with that. A lot of that technology spun off into the civilian sector. Matter of fact, there was a whole section of people dedicated to just technical transfer from what the military was learning into the civilian sector. There's hundreds of people just with that as their mission, to find the technologies that could be transferred out. So you don't have to look at your business, in finance and say, yeah, finance, it's all about the money. And money is all about control, power, and force. And no, I'm in the control, power, force industries, and that's a bad thing. Well, that's not necessarily true. Money in the hands of somebody really positive is usually a very helpful thing. They don't necessarily use it for control, power, force. They use it to feed and to help and to make things better for people. So you can't look at just dealing with money and say money's evil. That's not the case. It's people who are good or evil. Look at the big picture. What is it that you're doing and how does it affect things? If you look at it and say, well, it's entirely negative, there isn't anything about what I do in my industry that's helpful to anybody, well, then it's probably a good industry to get out of. But there's very few industries like that. Most things become industries because they serve a need. That's why they exist. If there was no need, they wouldn't be there. Well, when you serve a need, that need is not always to dominate. People can take money and dominate with it, but people can take money and do good things with it. So don't be too hard on yourself about that. It's not about purity. It's about, you need a livelihood. You have obligations to family, children. You have obligations to your neighbors and other people, to be helpful sometimes. And you need some money to do that. And the people who have less money, well, they struggle with their less money, and they can still make good choices. So just because you're on the bottom of the economic ladder doesn't mean you can't be a superb human being with a very low entropy. You can. Money doesn't count when it comes to entropy. If you're dirt poor and you make really good choices, well, you're a terrific person and you're really high up on the list of great people, no matter how poor you are. And if you're rich and you make poor choices and you run over people and you hurt people, well, even though you're a billionaire and can afford anything you want, you're a terrible person and you are down at the bottom of the list of people who are useful and good. So people who are happy are people who are giving. You get happy from being helpful, from giving. People who use their money for control, power, force are generally not happy. They suffer the consequences of poor decisions. They're not very happy. Oh, yes, they have everything they want, but that doesn't make you happy. Money can't buy happiness. So it's a mixed bag always. The things you work in probably have upsides and downsides as far as what they do to the level of entropy in the world. But you do your best to make the things that you do have a positive effect, and you do them as well as you can. And sometimes they'll probably be used badly, and sometimes they'll probably be used well.
Thing too is that he enjoys the work, he finds it interesting, and he likes the learning and learning about it.
Mm-hmm.
So those are important things too. How much do you enjoy what you're doing, and how much do you want to learn and be proficient at what you're doing too?
Yes, you can't, if you make something that's useful to the society, that's why the business exists. If there was no use to the society, then it wouldn't exist. It has to be useful in some way, or it wouldn't be there. So yes, some things can evolve to be more and more useless, and eventually they go away. Some things evolve to be more and more valuable, and they get bigger. That's just the way it is. So don't search for purity. Search for the lowest entropy path that you can take, and try to find that and do it. And that probably won't require you to leave your job, unless your job is just a really awful job. If you do things that just don't do anything other than hurt people, then that would be a good job to lose. Or if you have a job that requires you to be unethical, immoral, that would be a good job to quit. But most people don't have jobs that are purely unethical or purely ethical. They have jobs that end up hurting some people, helping some people. But at the end, if they help more than they hurt, then if they provide pathways for people to grow, incentive for people to contribute, then look at the whole, see what the total path is, and then take the low entropy path. And I think you'll find that most jobs that most people have some positive things to them. They're helpful, mostly. Well, that's about as good as it gets. You can't live your life. Everything you do is supremely low entropy for everybody. That's just not the way it works in our culture. We interact with everybody. All of our choices interact with people. So we make a choice that affects 10 other people. Now, those 10 other people, because of our choice, they make a different choice. And that each one of them affects 10 other people too. And then now we got 100 people have been affected by your choice. And maybe it goes on through 3 or 4 different connections. So what you choose to do may affect hundreds of people. but you can't really worry about the choices that other people make and take responsibility for the fact that 3 levels down, somebody did something awful. That's not your problem. Your problem is just to do what you can do in the best way that you can do it.
Thank you, Tom. Thank you for answering Jeffrey's question and expounding on that. You have more power than you think. Hi, this is Donna from MBT Events. I have had the privilege to work with Tom Campbell for nearly 20 years now, and I can tell you from the feedback received through all those years that he has improved and changed thousands of lives with his My Big Toe theory. As a physicist and explorer of the larger reality, Tom has developed a program where you can learn to access and develop your natural ability as consciousness. His expertly crafted binaural beats are included. Details are in the description below. Thank you.
I and MBT Events hope you like this video. If you do, then you should consider being a Patreon member, because Patreon members get early access to our special content. You will also be able to get your questions answered by me in special Q&A sessions, and most importantly, your contribution as a patron member will enable us to produce the content that you're looking for. So thank you.